Welcome to Practical Shooting Explained. We have another gear review. We've received a lot of requests, and a gun that I don't have any knowledge of, but a lot of people want to hear about, is the Canik pistol. So I brought my friend Jason Bradley to talk about the gun because he shoots them quite a bit. He's a very, is fair to say, a nationally competitive guy with them. And so you can shoot us straight on like how the guns work, what breaks, just give us the details more than just I shot this gun that's 500 rounds. It was okay. Like, shoot me straight on this stuff.
You bet.
So what is the Canik? It's kind of like a Glock, right? Where it's a striker fired polymer gun.
Yeah. So it's a striker fired polymer gun. I was trying out something here, putting something over the dot. It's polymer fired. It's a polymer gun, striker fired. I think the barrel's 5.2 inches, so it's essentially the equivalent to the Glock 34.
Okay. And it's striker fired, so it's the same trigger pull every time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So how much do those guns run? Are they about Glock money?
They're cheaper than Glocks.
Okay.
So this gun, before I've got 3 of them, and I was buying them around $425.
Okay. Cool. So it's a fairly inexpensive gun. Okay.
Yeah. I think the price has gone up in the current situation where everything's hard to get, but
Sure.
That's what I was buying them at, if you can find one.
Okay. And then I see you've got a red dot on that, so we could talk about that too.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the features? Are there any features, or what separates that from a Glock? Is there anything, I guess, noteworthy?
I think so. It's got I would say a lot of the complaints about a stock Glock is the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of complaints about Glocks, period, is the trigger. Even when you put a connector kit in there or slick it up, do whatever you want, it's still a Glock trigger. And this trigger is night and day better. So if trigger pull is important to you, which a lot of people it is,
Sure.
It's kind of hard not to be. This trigger is way better. Now, the stock trigger on this gun is still way better than a Glock, but I'm not shooting it stock. But the stock trigger is still great. It just has a lot of take up, a lot of swing of the trigger before you hit the wall.
So what kind of trigger do you have in it? Is it aftermarket? Is it polished? Just springs? What's the story?
It's a combination. So I bought a Freedom Smith Pro. That's the model of their trigger. It's the Freedom Smith Pro trigger.
Okay.
And really, it's just the trigger shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And what the trigger shoe does is it takes 60% of the trigger swing out before you hit the wall.
Okay.
And so the trigger just, there's the take up, and then it just breaks. Whereas you have you have double the take up on the stock trigger. So, and then I swapped some springs out.
Okay. What about the grip? Are there like grip modules? Can you interchange, or is it kind of just is what it is?
The grip itself, I shoot a lot of pro grip on my hands, so that's what the residue is
Sure.
there. But you do have a interchangeable back strap.
Okay.
And yeah, I actually have a aftermarket brass back strap.
So for adding weight, basically, so it like felt recoil perceived as less. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. It adds about 3.5 ounces, and it does. I've shot them side by side. It does make a difference. Is it huge, and does it make me shoot better? I don't know. But basically what happened was I bought this gun, bought one of those, tried it, and just never took it out. And so when it was time to buy another gun, when I decided I was going to shoot this gun, and when it was time to buy another gun, I just bought more of them.
No, that makes sense.
Just to keep stuff the same.
And then the optics ready guns are pretty. I guess, is that an optics ready gun?
Yeah. Another thing about it is it is an optic ready gun. It comes with optic plates for all the major optics. So I'm shooting a Delta Point Pro, but it comes with 3 different plates that will fit the majority of the optics.
Okay.
One other thing about it is it comes with really good factory sights, at least really good as far as factory sights go.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually Warren tactical sights. So this is the
Okay.
This is the rear sight cover plate, and that rear sight is in there. So when you take that off, this piece comes off. This gun is essentially, um, it's very similar to the Walther. I mean, it's essentially internally identical. So, but that's the Warren Tactical rear. So Warren Tactical is a pretty big name in the Glock sights several years ago, and they're good sights. And the front sight's a fiber optic sight. Let's see if I can get that in there. But I've got so many rounds.
It came with a fiber optic front?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got so many rounds on it, that fiber optics, and I've never shot it in production. I've only shot carry optics with this gun. So I'm trying to think if anything else sets it apart from the Glock. I actually think Glocks are very accurate. This gun, I think, is a little bit more accurate. The problem with Glocks is getting past the trigger pull, in my mind.
Sure.
Once you get that figured out, the Glocks are great. So this gun, with that brass weight, with the optic on it. Now I didn't put an empty mag in it, but with the optic, the brass plate, and the mounting plate, it's only 30 ounces. It's less than 31 ounces. Almost 31, so it's like 30.7 ounces. So it's not a heavy gun.
So it's still lighter than maybe the Shadows, the Tanfolios, the all metal guns. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And then so to put an optic on it, you basically buy the gun. It's got the iron sight plate, and then it has the plate ready to accept the other optics. So all you need is just the red dot, whatever optic you pick, and you're basically good to go then. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Cool. No, I like it. So what's your favorite thing about that gun? Why did you pick that gun?
Favorite thing? I mean, last year I shot a Glock. I used to say triggers don't matter, but when you got a trigger that is this good, so the trigger, even the stock trigger, breaks very light. We'll say 3.5 pounds. The reset is extremely short. So if you like those things, you're going to like this trigger. This trigger, like I said, it just takes a very good amount of the take up out of the trigger. It basically, this trigger shoe moves the trigger forward. It changes the geometry of the trigger bar. I'm probably not saying that right, but it takes a lot of the pre-travel of the trigger. It's moving a lot now because I don't have it cocked, but
sure.
It's just a really good trigger. So is that my favorite thing? I think so. I mean, this is a very short break. It's very 1911 like in the sense of, I'm going to get a lot of criticism for that, in the sense of how much it moves and then how it resets. It is a swinging hinge trigger. It's not, sliding straight back.
Yeah.
Like the 1911. So it is a swinging hinge trigger, if that matters. But the trigger's great. The gun is super accurate. I mean, it's just, there's not a shot I'm worried about not making. For the most part, I didn't have that problem with the Glock too much. I mean, I knew the gun could make it. I just knew if I yanked the trigger. I mean, this gun, you can still yank the trigger and move the gun down.
Sure, I get it.
Yeah. So I mean, this is not going to take it out, but this gun is, the trigger is more forgiving. I'll just put it that way. So my favorite thing is, I think it's accurate. It's two things: accurate and the trigger.
What's your least favorite thing about that gun?
So my least favorite thing about this gun is probably the mags, the magwell.
Okay.
Most guns do not come with good magwells. I don't know if you can really see that, and if you can, I've taken a Dremel to it, and most guns don't come with a good magwell. It's not very forgiving in the profile of the opening and to get a new mag in there. This gun is no different. It's not the worst one I've ever seen, but it's definitely not the best one. So the mag's pretty narrow, pretty tight. I took a Dremel to it, beveled this in, beveled these ends. But that's still not the thing I dislike the most about it. Inside the gun, on each side, so on this side of it, on this side, inside the grip, there's two ribs that run, essentially, one runs this way, and they both run down, and they're on both sides.
Okay.
You have to essentially take some of these, so you go get these from your girlfriend or your wife, and you start with a coarse one, and you work each one down a little bit, just a couple passes, and then you go to medium and fine. It's like, and then I even finish it off with some really fine sandpaper. And what that does is it removes some material from it, so the mags will drop out a little bit better. If you take these mags and you load these mags up to capacity, they will swell a little bit, and they will hang up in the gun a little bit sometimes. Not all the time. Yeah. So that's what I've done. I don't know how much material I've taken off, but it's just a trial and error thing. And then the other thing about it, this gun is a lot like a Glock in the sense of when you dump the mag, when you go to eject the mag, you need to be train yourself to hold the gun up straight, vertically, so it just drops right out. If you do any of this motion, I mean, right there is a perfect example. So it just that right there, and then this one's real bad. That if you do that, and I'm going to try to see it move, but I just barely depressed it enough that it didn't move out far enough, and now it's hung up. So, and then one last thing about it, if you put extended base pads on it, all this does is just add weight to the bottom. And so this is weight in the bottom, and it essentially will wedge itself in the gun. So this part will like wedge up against the inside of the gun. So you have to just hold it vertically, make sure you get a good button press, and it will drop right out.
Okay.
But if you barely just press that button and you've got it turned, you could have a mag hung up on you, and then you're fighting that, trying to get it out while you're running through the rest of the stage, and then you get mad.
Sure. So very positively pressing the button and waiting until it falls out.
Well, just hold it vertically and very positive.
Yeah.
It's something you just train for. Essentially what happens is this is similar to the Glock. That's why you get the guys that shoot Glock. Man, do the wrist flick. You don't want to be doing that because you're never going to come back to the right spot and then meet this hand. So this will be inconsistent, and then you try to get this hand in there. It's not a good technique. So same thing with the Glocks. You just hold it straight vertically, press the button, make sure you get a good press, and it will drop right out.
Okay. What about maintenance or breakage? Are the guns finicky at all? Any issues with reliability?
Yeah, out of the box, like every gun, they are, I would say, finicky. So out of the box, the recoil spring assembly is stout. It's pretty heavy. If you're shooting factory ammo, it's probably fine. But if you're shooting reloads and you're skirting the power floor factor, or the power factor floor, yeah, you're going to have some problems. So now you can go to Century Arms, who's I believe the importer for the Canik, and they have a reduced power recoil spring assembly that they'll sell you. And I've never tried it, but I've heard that works. I didn't want to try that because after 5,000 rounds, when you need to replace the spring, you have to buy a new assembly, and you can't. I don't like captured guide rods. So I bought an aftermarket guide rod, but that's what you have to do in every gun. You have to replace the guide rod, or at least the recoil spring, and then some other springs. And this one's really no different. So once you get the recoil assembly spring lined out, your ammo, your competition ammo should run. I also run a little hot ammo. I just shot Area 4, and my ammo chronoed at 141, and it's been chronoing at 138 to 139. So I shoot a little bit hotter ammo than needed, just because I'm not going to go adjust it, because I can't feel a difference, or at least I'm not worried about it after the buzzer.
Yeah, like for people listening that wouldn't understand power factor, basically you're shooting ammo that's lighter than what would be factory ammo off the shelf, but it's not so light that the gun barely cycles. So you're shooting, is that fair to say? It's lighter than what you'd buy off the shelf, but it's not crazy. It's just kind of maybe medium would be a way to say it. Is that fair?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Where did you get like a? Go ahead,
if I could say one more thing about the recoil spring, this gun, the way the lockup on the barrel lugs are, the top and the lower lugs, and I really think it's I don't know enough about the design of it, so this is a lot of assumptions, but I know what's worked for me and what's not. The gun, essentially with too light a recoil spring, when you're running, you can essentially knock it out of battery, and it will hang right up right there. And then when you go to pull the trigger, it's not in battery, so the trigger will drop. But really what happens is the slide will just close that last, I don't know, 0.003 of an inch. I mean, very little amount. And then you have a dead trigger with a live round, so you just have to rack it again. So I bought an aftermarket guide rod. It's a steel one. It's not anything heavy. It's just a steel gun. It's actually made for another gun. And then I bought a 1911 flat wire 15-pound recoil spring. So I think the recoil spring on this one is really where this gun is made, or you make it or break it. Is you got to get one that's heavy enough to keep the gun in battery, and it's not just heavy. It's how the spring length, and so I'm using a flat wire Wilson Combat 1911 15-pound recoil spring, and that one works good for me.
Who's the guide rod? What gun is the guide rod for, and where would somebody get one from? If you
Okay, so
remember.
this guide rod is for the Walther steel frame, the Q5SF. I think you could get one for the polymer frame too. The difference between those two is that this is from ZR Tactical Solutions, and the difference is that they mill a little hole in the flat part of the guide rod for the steel frame Q5 because there's something in the locking block that hole has to be there for. So the polymer guide rod for the Q5 will probably work in this too because these are basically identical. But that's what I'm using. Again, I bought one of them. I think I had one, and so I tried it, and it's worked. And so I was like, well, once I find something that works, I'm like, okay, I'll buy that one again. So I bought 3 more. So ZR Tactical Solutions.
Okay.
Steel frame Q5. And then, like I said, a 1911 Wilson Combat flat wire 15 round spring. And then since we're talking about springs, I'm using stock Glock striker spring, which is 5.5 pound. And then I'm using a reduced power Glock safety plunger spring.
Okay.
Now, and then I'm sorry, one more thing.
No.
So on the Freedom Smith trigger, when you put this trigger in here, like I said, it pulls the trigger bar inside forward a little bit, and the stock trigger return spring that's on here, I think it puts more tension on it, so it actually will increase your trigger pull. Like guys are like, hey, I put the Freedom Smith trigger in here, man, and my trigger pull got heavier. So you can do a couple things. You can go to Spring Co. and buy their trigger return spring. I've not used it, but I know some guys have. Or you can get fancy and go to Bass Pro or your bait and tackle shop and buy a split ring and buy the smallest one, or this one's a number 1, the smallest one I could find. And you basically add it to the rear of that factory trigger return spring, and then this little split ring goes around the trigger hook where the original spring went. It is kind of a pain to do. This little holding this trigger, this split ring, and then getting it in that loop. We'll test your patience.
I can see that.
Once you do a few of them, it's okay.
Good.
So
awesome. So I mean, who's this gun for? Who would you recommend it for? It sounds like they're maintenance wise. We didn't really talk about like cleaning wise. Does it have to be cleaned often as far as how many rounds you shoot it, like before you'd have malfunctions, kind of a thing?
I don't think so. I typically don't let my guns get too dirty. I'm just, that doesn't say I won't shoot 2,000 rounds through them. I'm not sure I've ever shot 5,000 rounds through any gun without cleaning it. Now, I may have, and I may have just recently done it with this gun. So I know I had a lot of rounds on this gun, about twice as much as normal, but I ended up cleaning it right before a major match. So I'm going to say no, it doesn't require a lot of cleaning. It's like your typical polymer gun, striker fired. I think you can shoot it as long as you keep making sure there's a little oil on the rails and the barrel hood. I would worry that the barrel hood is and inside the slide where that part of the barrel rides, that part is clean. There's no lugs there on the actual slide itself, but I'd make sure that is clean and smooth, and that part just kind of will go over each other. Other than that, I don't think you need to worry about it.
No, I like it. Awesome. Anything else we should know? This has been super helpful. I really appreciate it.
You bet. I don't think so.
Perfect. Okay. Well, really appreciate you taking the time. Of course, if anyone has any questions, leave them below in the comments, and we'll get a hold of Jason.